Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. I hope you still have enough energy to listen to my presentation. My name is Daniel Semakula. The Innovations and Knowledge Translation Officer at the College of Health Sciences, McChRS University. So here's the answer, which happens to be 17 years. And the question is, given this answer, what exactly is the question that we're looking at? This is a study that was done looking at delays in translation of research from the time that research is funded up to the time that we start looking at it in policy documents. So, and the average, at least from the research done in 2011, seemed to be 17 years. There's more research being done, but research done by Morris and colleagues mentioned that takes about 17 years. So if you imagine yourself doing research, if that research is, holding other factors constant, if that research is going to find its way into policy, it might take about 17 years, holding other factors constant. So the other interesting thing about this research was that for every other year that this research delayed before entering into policy documents, there was a loss of internal rate of return. So meaning it became less and less valuable as time passed. Related to this is a study that was done by Okwaro, probably published last year, which showed that over a period of about 20 years, looking at research done at McChRS, University College of Health Sciences, only about 4% of about 1,100 studies that had been done by master's students over the span of 20 years made or found its way into some policy documents. So again, these are points of reflection for us sitting in this room. So why is this an issue? We all agree that some research is not actually immediately usable, and I will put that in quotes. We can explain it later after the presentation. But there's lack of access to clear, reliable evidence, limitations of journalists, policymakers, and the public to understanding health research findings, the lack of time, the resources, competition for space, and attitudes of research generators and consumers. So what are we doing at McChRS, College of Health Sciences? We are approaching this issue from a number of angles. One is to build capacity for research utilization. We're talking about capacity to acquire, assess, adapt, and apply research evidence. And we'll talk about that later in the next few slides. Conducting research on barriers to and methods for accelerating use of research evidence, developing resources and tools to make it more understandable and usable, developing resources and tools to make research evidence more accessible, direct stakeholder engagement, and direct support for the use of research evidence. So one of the solutions that people looked at then around 2012 was to develop the Innovations and Knowledge Translation Office, where I happen to sit, and it had the mandate of supporting researchers and communicating research evidence to the non-academic public, stimulating interest among potential users to adopt research evidence into decision making. We create opportunities for interaction between research generators and users, support researchers in intellectual property management and commercialization of products of research, and to learn, in so doing, to learn and advance the science and art of knowledge translation. Some of the things we engaged in that we, as part of supporting researchers to communicate clearly, we work with them to develop evidence briefs for policy and research summaries. These are plain language summaries of research. And as part of stimulating interest among researchers, we try to create awareness and advocacy among potential research consumers in different fora. And then as far as intellectual property management is concerned, there is technology transfer and engagement with industry policy. And then identifying and creating opportunities for interaction. We hold knowledge transfer dialogues and innovation clinics. Some of you have already participated in these activities. So I'd like to highlight, again, these are case studies of how the College of Health Sciences is positioning itself to move the needle as far as this issue is concerned. So there's a project called Thrive, training health researchers into vocational excellence in East Africa. And I just want to highlight one objective from the four for this project, which is to implement public engagement programs in those countries that promote understanding the value and use of science among the lay public, policymakers, civil society, and secondary school students. So I'm highlighting this project because it's one of the very unique projects which, even if it's a purely scientific, science-based project, it actually has an objective on public engagement, policy engagement, engagement of journalists. So we'll look at examples of how this is being done. So it's a project that's currently supporting about 17 PhD students and 7 postdocs, over 20 master's students, and we're working with these researchers to, as they conduct their research, to find ways, to find opportunities of sharing their work with the public. And the approach we're using is that we would like to start as early as possible, as we will see. But there is a lot of engagement going on, and the idea is to develop researchers who are competent in their research, but also recognize the importance of engaging the public with research and doing it early within the research process. So one of the things we do in that project is falls under the general domain of scientific citizenship, but we train researchers, we provide support to them and opportunities, create opportunities for engagement, and we also participate in post-engagement activities. These are activities that follow up on the engagement that one will do. So this is one of the PhD fellows. I think this was last week or 2 weeks ago. Dina, seated over there, participating in a dialogue. Early in her research, she's participating in, she doesn't have results yet, do you?
I have.
You have? Oh, okay. Okay. But she mentioned that I think the study is not yet complete, right? Yeah. So the study is not yet complete, but she's already sharing her results. So this probably should respond to some of the issues that came in the earlier presentation about how then do you share, before everything is complete. Just to highlight that, within Thrive, we're encouraging people to start engaging policymakers with the media and the general public early in their research process. We, again, are receiving support as the College of Health Sciences from Thrive to develop a research dissemination portal to respond to some of the earlier challenges that we mentioned regarding access to reliable information. So the idea here is we could create a space where one can have an overview of all the research going on at McChS University College of Health Sciences, research summaries presented journalistically and in a story format that can link back to research reports, publications, or other evidence related to that. The problem we're trying to solve here is that if you ask anyone in this room that, can you tell me how much research is being done at McChS? Who is doing what research? And where is this research? And in which fields is that research? It will be difficult for anyone to provide some reliable information. So there is this space, which is a research repository. The people concerned try to update it, but sometimes it's lagging behind. But this space also doesn't have research summaries in plain language. So we'd like to provide this as an opportunity, as a platform, to provide that kind of service. So it's still under development. Dixon here is working on it. Again, Dixon is supported by Thrive to support this kind of work. I'd also like to highlight one other project, which is the Informed Health Churches project. And the uniqueness of this project is that it's working with children and parents to stimulate their interest in the concept of research, specifically critical thinking around claims that people make about the benefits and harms of treatments. If you've watched Ugandan TV, they have so many claims about all sorts of things. So what we're trying to do under this project is to develop and evaluate resources which can enable the lay public, including children, to assess the trustworthiness of claims that people make about what harms and what helps as far as healthcare is concerned. Those that have worked in public health centers, you know what happens if you're going to immunize, going for a vaccination campaign. You have to call the DPC so that, in some areas, at least where I worked, so that people don't stone you. Why? Because there are claims around all sorts of issues regarding vaccination. So we're trying to use evidence and try to see if children can actually appreciate, evidence. Kinds of things we teach to them is the role of clinical trials, why we need clinical trials in evaluating effectiveness of treatments, why traditional beliefs can be misleading, why more is not necessarily better. If a doctor prescribes 5 meals, for a cough, and you want to heal faster, should you take 10 meals? So these are some of the things we engage with children about. So critical thing about claims, and we also try to provide easy access to reliable information so that people can make better choices about treatments. Those are some of the materials that we've been using. So we have a podcast as well as So last year we presented some of the work that we did in the Lancet, and they were kind enough to appreciate the value of this work and accepted 2 publications in the Lancet. When the BBC heard about the work that we did, because there's this global problem of fake news, they said, oh, this is the kind of thing that we also need in the UK. So there's a professor at Cambridge who is a professor of public understanding of risk, who got in touch with colleagues at the BBC, and they came and made a documentary about this particular work. It's currently on it's a 1-hour documentary documenting this work and its value, and it's currently on the BBC. And we've tried to engage in several fora, and through that engagement, a number of people have actually picked interest in this work to implement it in their countries, in their schools. So the materials which were developed in Uganda by members of the research team, some of whom are seated in this room, are now being used in Kenya, in Rwanda, China, Iran, Spain, Mexico, Ireland, France, Germany, Austria, the US, UK, and many more countries are coming on board as we continue to engage people. Again, highlighting the issue of results from research and how they can actually be propagated beyond where that research was conducted. This research was done here in Uganda, but it's currently being adopted in all these other countries as we speak, and many more countries. Building Bridges is another project that I would like to talk about. It's a network of researchers, journalists, and policymakers and librarians with the aim of influencing policies through knowledge translation, promotes the dissemination of health information, and fostering long-term relationships. Professor Ndezi and Professor Tumwine are working on this project, who are primarily clinicians, but they actually work on this project to bring different stakeholders, policymakers, journalists, and other people together to discuss how research can actually be used, shared, and used. The Africa Center for Systematic Reviews and Knowledge Translation, which some of you might have heard about, is doing some work on building capacity for conducting and utilizing systematic reviews among researchers, health professionals, policymakers in Uganda, and conducting high-quality systematic reviews, but also disseminating the products of that process. There is another project, which is Use Evidence, which is a rapid response service. The idea is that policymakers might be seated somewhere and they have some questions on financing, governance, or any other issue that they might have, but they contact a person or institution somewhere, and those institutions actually support them in contextualizing evidence, looking for evidence, contextualizing it, and then furnish them with reports which they can use to make decisions in real time. So the cycle takes about 28 days, depending on the question, but there's back and forth between policymakers and research analysts. SPEED is another project at the School of Public Health, supporting policy engagement for evidence-based decisions, and the idea is to engage and influence policymakers with contextually adapted evidence for health policy and system changes to advance universal healthcare coverage, among other things. They're responding to 2 main challenges, which is limited capacity for policy analysis, advice, and influence at the School of Public Health, but also incoherence in policy due to pluralistic and uncoordinated stakeholder activity among others. So those are the cardinal issues they are responding. We also have the clearinghouse, Uganda Clearinghouse for health policy systems and systems research. As a PhD fellow who is working on the idea of having a clearinghouse for policy. And what they're trying to look at is it possible to have a one-stop center for policy-related documents in the country? Research done, from say the college or from another institution, can that be brought together? And if we have policy-related documents, can these be put in one place where policymakers can easily access them? The problem we're trying to address is the problem of access to reliable and accurate information. So the fellow is still working on this, and they're testing out if this is actually possible and whether it will be relevant and whether it will actually work. Conclusion, I think there are a lot of opportunities for increasing research uptake, but there are also a lot of challenges, some of which limitations, as we highlighted earlier, of journalists. Those remain, policymakers and public in understanding of research. Research has limitations in communicating research evidence, lack of access to clear, reliable research evidence, lack of time and other resources to find and use reliable sources of evidence, competition for space and audiences. I just highlighted this in red because we think this is something that we can actually be able to address. The issues of attitudes of research generators and consumers. There's a typo there. But researchers and consumers of research. You must have heard of the popular story that goes that when you go to policymakers, they'll tell you, and you ask them why they're not using research in their business process, they'll tell you, oh, it's because the researchers are actually doing research which is not relevant to answering our day-to-day needs. And if you go to researchers, they say, oh no, but we're doing a lot of research. Policymakers are not picking it up. So there are these counter-accusations, some of which arise from attitudes, confusion about roles, but we think that, given what we know about the lags and the meaning of those lags, we think that each of us, could actually make efforts to improve this. I'd like to conclude again with 2 points of reflection. One, beyond the journal publication, what role can you as a researcher play in the long and convoluted research utilization pathway? And what kind of researchers do you want to be? Do you want to be one whose work influences journal decisions, publish, not publish? Or do you want to be the kind of researcher whose work influences policy, practice decisions, and impacts communities? I'll leave that to you. Thank you so much for listening.